So, okay, I got it.
I'm planning on going back to UFC.
You do?
If they'll have me, I would like to go back and fucking whoop someone's ass there.
Well, who would you want to if it was offered? Justin Gaethje, it sounds like.
I'm not fighting at 55 though, but right now I'm not fighting in there because there's nobody to fight really. It's kind of slow rolling.
I feel like UFC would.
I don't really have a name in mind right now in the UFC. That's why I'm not there right now. Otherwise,
but the name, the draw, the excitement that you'd bring to it, I feel like it's really lacking in UFC. Everybody's
that's
rushing, everybody's
like, I'd
wrestling.
be there if there was somebody that I wanted to go fight. But
I want to see the rubber match with Conor McGregor.
With time for sure. Yeah, whenever he's back. Me and him for sure got unfinished.
If there's another fight that would sell and that would be huge, it would be that. It would be Diaz 3.
Oh yeah.
That could be, especially if Diaz gets past Poirier.
Yes.
Shit, even if he doesn't. I mean, just that fight alone. I mean, there's the history between those two guys. I mean, that would be.
And it's so appealing stylistically as well. The fight, you know,
Yeah.
like I'm a grappler at heart. I love grappling, but I also understand that a jiu-jitsu tournament will put people to sleep. You know, even if you're into jiu-jitsu, it's hard to watch a jiu-jitsu tournament.
Yes.
But anybody can see a punch hitting someone in the head and them falling down. That's you know, that's exciting. And him and Diaz is such a great personality matchup. It's such a great skill clash. You know, if I was to design somebody that's going to bring the best out of Conor, you'd want someone that, you know, can hit back and take a big shot and put up at the trash. It's a beautiful fight. I would love to see that rematch.
Yeah, the thing about Diaz when they first fought was that he didn't give a fuck about trash talk. It didn't bother him.
The door swings open and everyone knows exactly who just walked in. That unmistakable presence, that energy that can shift an entire room in seconds. Nate Diaz doesn't just enter spaces, he commands them. And when he pointed directly at Conor McGregor with that white house card held high in the air, it wasn't just a gesture. It was a declaration. This wasn't about some polite legacy tour where aging fighters come back for one last payday. This wasn't about chasing belts or climbing rankings. This was pure, unfiltered chaos meeting years of unresolved business. The kind of moment that reminds you why combat sports are unlike anything else on the planet. When true bad blood collides with massive attention and unlimited stakes, you get moments like this. Moments that don't need explanation because the intensity speaks for itself.
That Conor McGregor is being talked to headline the White House card. I don't buy it. I can't buy it. Why are we would be turning to Conor McGregor? And the answer is also out there because he is the sport's biggest star. That is true. So is that what you need? If you've got the open checkbook and you've got the magic wand, without saying names, do you say, I'm going to put as my main event the sport's biggest star? Is that your answer? Doesn't matter who he's fighting. What if it's a championship match? If you have an open checkbook and you have a magic wand and you don't use any names, but you're going to put the championship on, would you say heavyweight? Would you say women's 135? Would you say wherever Kazmat Chimaev's at? Like, how is it that you would answer that question? And then what if you're really going to go for a big fight? What if you really follow this for a long time? You're going to do what we used to call a super fight, but now we call it title versus title.
Here's what's absolutely wild about this whole situation. In any other scenario, you'd expect a champion or top contender to have multiple options, right? Big names calling them out, promoters throwing money around, agents working phones trying to set up the biggest possible fights. But when that coveted White House card got dangled in front of Nate Diaz, there was only one name that mattered. Not the current champions, not the rising stars, not the guys with the most impressive win streaks. Just Conor McGregor. And here's the kicker, Diaz didn't need any fancy sales pitches or elaborate explanations about pay-per-view numbers and global reach. The simple fact is nothing else moves the needle for him if it isn't McGregor standing across that octagon. The fans are practically begging for it on every social media platform. The third chapter of their legendary saga is sitting there like a loaded gun, waiting for someone to pull the trigger. And honestly, everyone already knows exactly why this fight has to happen, even if they won't admit it publicly.
last thing, White House card, like he said, you want Conor McGregor?
Yeah, but the whole thing's on WWE, so
Right.
it's like, at least that's happening and getting something to talk about, something to watch, and I'm looking forward to that fight actually.
Now fans want it.
Devontae and Paul should be good, and then because what else are you looking forward to? Hurry up.
Nothing.
Hurry up. What else?
If it's not you, McGregor, Ryan, it's nobody.
So it's good. It's good. We'll
Now fans want you versus McGregor 3. Do you want that fight?
Yeah, for sure.
White House?
Yeah, what time?
But here's where things get complicated, and this is crucial to understand. Dana White didn't completely slam the door on the trilogy discussion, but he definitely threw some cold water on any immediate plans. White pointed out something that casual fans often forget. A single year in this sport can completely flip the entire landscape. Think about how fast things change in MMA. Champions lose belts overnight. Rising stars get knocked out by unknown fighters. Retirement announcements get reversed 6 months later. McGregor has been dropping hints about a comeback for months now, posting training videos and making cryptic statements about his return. Diaz has been openly campaigning for big fights and staying in the public eye. But here's the reality check. Any certainty about what happens next is basically meaningless right now. By the time July 4th, 2026 rolls around, we could be looking at completely different champions, entirely new storylines, and matchups that nobody is even thinking about today. The trilogy isn't dead, but it's definitely not getting signed anytime soon.
That trilogy is...
That fight's a year away. Landscape will change so much by next 4th of July. Who knows what's going to happen? Who knows who's going to be on the card? What the main event will be, or who will hold all the titles? Everything could be completely different, so it's not even worth thinking about.
Now here's where it gets really interesting. While Dana White is playing the cautious businessman, Michael Bisping went straight for the throat with his analysis. Bisping doesn't deal in maybes or hypotheticals. His take was crystal clear. If Nate Diaz makes his way back to the octagon and Conor McGregor returns to active competition, that's the fight to make every single time. No question, no debate, no other considerations needed. Think about what we're really talking about here. This rivalry already ranks among the biggest in UFC history. The first fight was a shocking upset that nobody saw coming. The second fight was an instant classic that settled nothing and left everyone wanting more. Now imagine placing that kind of iconic showdown on a historic White House card, surrounded by other massive fights, and positioned as the centerpiece of the entire event. For Bisping, this goes way deeper than promotional hype or pay-per-view numbers. He acknowledges that McGregor doesn't necessarily need another fight to cement his legacy, but there's something primal about competition that never leaves true fighters. That irresistible pull for one more moment, one more win, one more chance to prove something to yourself and the world. And when you're talking about a card of such historic significance, McGregor's involvement feels almost inevitable.
If Nate Diaz was to come back. But if he was, and if Conor McGregor does actually make it back, I think that's the fight to make all day long. The one-on-one, there were some of the biggest fights in UFC history. Nate Diaz versus Conor McGregor at the White House would be absolutely insane. It probably will have Tom Aspinall versus John Jones in the main event. It probably will have Conor McGregor versus someone, Michael Chandler or Nate Diaz, in the co-main event. So that just kind of sets the tone for how big that card would be. What do you think? Do you think Conor McGregor will actually make it back? Of course, he hasn't fought since 2021, right? It's going to be 5 years since he last fought. I, for one, fair play to the guy. Fair play, man. Respect. He doesn't need to do this. He doesn't need to come back. He's got lots of other avenues and ways to make money, but fighting is something that never leaves you, okay? It's a part of who you are. It's in your DNA. It's part of your soul. And he wants to come back and he wants to get his hands raised in victory. Of course, he wants to come back and be a part of that.
But get this, Bisping then expanded his vision beyond just the McGregor-Diaz rivalry and started talking about pure spectacle. If we're genuinely discussing once-in-a-lifetime superfights that could shake the entire sport to its foundation, he didn't hesitate to name the fight that would eclipse everything else. Jon Jones versus Alex Pereira. Let that sink in for a moment. Pereira's meteoric rise through multiple divisions, his knockout power that defies belief, and his star power that's growing by the day. Now picture him standing across from the greatest light heavyweight of all time, possibly the greatest fighter, period. If Pereira somehow managed to beat Jon Jones, it wouldn't just be a victory. It would permanently cement a legacy that no one in the history of combat sports has ever achieved. But here's where Bisping brought everyone back to reality. He admitted that McGregor versus Chandler still remains the widely expected route for both fighters, based on their previous commitments and ongoing negotiations. However, He offered this crucial insight once the complex web of politics, power dynamics, and business relationships within the sport enters the picture. Even the most carefully laid plans can shift in ways nobody anticipates.
Fair, if we're talking about super fights, if we're talking about something that's really going to get the MMA world excited, then it would be Jon Jones versus Alex Pereira, right? Alex Pereira is one of the biggest stars. He came back in style and destroyed Magomed Ankalaev. The man's phenomenal. He's unbelievable. He's a two-weight division champion. What he's achieved in this sport is ridiculous. If he was to face Jon Jones and if he was to beat him, then I guess he would go on a fight for the third belt, and that'd be it. That'd be set in stone. Alex Pereira would, without a doubt, without a shadow of a doubt, be the greatest mixed martial artist to ever compete. Simple as that. There's no one that's fought for 3 belts or won 3 belts. Just the thought of that alone is crazy. I mean, it took me about, 26 fights in the UFC to even get 1 title shot. So they're not easy to come by. Anyway, so there's that. Now they're talking about Conor McGregor fighting Michael Chandler. That's going to be the fight that happens. We all know about that. There's nothing new there. And the thing is, if Donald Trump wants it, if the President of the United States wants it, and as Eric says in that video,
then the MMA guru brought up something that everyone's been thinking, but nobody wants to say out loud. He argued that the trilogy fight everyone's talking about only becomes truly compelling if Nate Diaz makes a real statement upon his return. Not just any comeback, but a dominant, undeniable victory in the welterweight division that reminds everyone why he's a problem for anyone in that weight class. This is a crucial distinction that separates casual fans from people who really understand how these big fights get made. Right now, hardcore fans seem split on what they want to see next. Some are buzzing about a potential Masvidal rematch, given their history and the bad blood that still exists. Others are looking at interesting matchups like Glover-Takes era or other legends looking for one last big payday. But here's what's really fascinating. Many influential figures in the sport, including Ariel Helwani and other well-connected insiders, are quietly pushing for Diaz versus McGregor as the next marquee matchup that needs to happen. They're not being loud about it, but the whispers are getting stronger. The question is whether the timing and circumstances will align to make it actually happen.
That's not the fight I want to see next, okay? If Nate Diaz comes back and gets a big win over someone in the welterweight division, okay? And he does it impressively, and then the McGregor fight happens, that's when I'm interested. But right now, I feel like the hardcore fans are kind of in mutual agreement that it's Masvidal or Gaethje. To us, it's kind of Masvidal or Gaethje, and for Chael Sonnen and Ariel Helwani to both say that they think Nate Diaz trilogy should be next is strange to me. Very strange to me, because I would love to see either Gaethje or Masvidal. I feel like everyone's in agreement here. We've seen that Donald Cerrone has been beaten by Conor McGregor in his return at UFC.
Now here's where things get spicy. Chael Sonnen, with his signature unfiltered style, decided to cut right through all the McGregor hype and inject some serious skepticism into the conversation. Sonnen openly admitted that, yes, McGregor is undeniably the sport's biggest star. That's not even debatable at this point. His pay-per-view numbers, global recognition, and cultural impact speak for themselves. However, Sonnen quickly countered that star power alone doesn't automatically make someone the right choice for a main event of such historic importance. Then he walked everyone through his thought process for building what he calls a dream card with unlimited resources. The question he posed was brilliant. Would you truly pick a non-title McGregor fight? Or would you lean toward a championship bout that actually has stakes beyond just entertainment? Maybe a massive heavyweight title fight, a women's bantamweight championship, or even a true super fight pitting champion versus champion. His point was profound. Star power absolutely matters in this business. But the bigger question is whether that star power creates the kind of matchup that truly moves the needle and delivers something meaningful beyond just a famous name.
Conor McGregor is being talked to headline the White House card. I don't buy it. I can't buy it. Why are we be turning to Conor McGregor? And the answer is also out there, because he is the sport's biggest star. That is true. So is that what you need? If you've got the open checkbook and you've got the magic wand, without saying names, do you say, I'm going to put as my main event the sport's biggest star? Is that your answer? Doesn't matter who he's fighting. What if it's a championship match? You have an open checkbook and you have a magic wand and you don't use any names, but you're going to put the championship on. Would you say heavyweight? Would you say women's 135? Would you say wherever Kazmat Chimaev's at? Like, how is it that you would answer that question? And then what if you're really going to go for a big fight? What if you really follow this for a long time? You're going to do what we used to call a super fight, but now we call it title versus title.
And listen to this part, because Sonen's logic gets even more compelling. He explained why all this McGregor talk for the White House card feels questionable when you really break it down. Think about the timeline we're discussing here. We're talking about penciling someone in for mid-2025 on a card that's supposedly happening in 2026, at a venue that hasn't even been built yet, with tickets nowhere near going on sale. The whole thing starts to strain credibility when you lay it out like that. But here's the fundamental problem Sonnen identified. If Conor isn't a current champion or actively in title contention at that time, then putting him as the headliner means your biggest star isn't fighting for a belt. In other words, a non-title McGregor bout headlining a card of this magnitude makes the whole bigger than big messaging incredibly harder to sell, even when there might be multiple legitimate title fights on the undercard. It fundamentally undermines what should be the most important fight of the night. You're essentially telling fans that entertainment value trumps competitive significance, which works for some events, but feels wrong for something as historic as a White House card.
And it's one of the reasons that I'm struggling with the idea that McGregor is being penciled in the middle of 2025 for a card that sits dead center in the middle of 2026 at a venue yet to be built for tickets that are yet to be on sale. I struggle with it because we're openly saying if we're going to put Conor on there that there's no title. Unless you believe that Conor McGregor is going to demote himself, right? The biggest draw should be the main event. Your biggest star, regardless of belt, should be the main event. But in this case, if our biggest draw and our biggest star is not a champion or a contender in any weight class, we're going to acknowledge up front that our biggest show will not contain a title, which makes it a little difficult down the road to go, this show's bigger than big. In fact, we got 2 titles up. Yes, you heard me, there's 2 titles. When can you ever get that? And nothing more important than
But wait, it gets even more controversial. Ben Askren, never one to shy away from hot takes, threw a complete curveball at Nate Diaz's entire legacy. Askren didn't hold back, arguing that Diaz, despite all the fan adoration and cultural impact, was really just an average fighter who managed to sell himself as elite through pure personality and self-belief. With what Askren described as a modest record both in the UFC and throughout his broader career, he framed Diaz's reputation as being far more about perception than actual consistent performance inside the octagon. Now, whether you agree with that assessment or not, you have to admit it's a provocative take that cuts to the heart of how we evaluate fighters. Are we judging based on wins and losses, or are we factoring in cultural impact, memorable moments, and the ability to create compelling narratives? Askren slyly hinted that speaking this kind of truth publicly about a fighter as beloved as Diaz might trigger a full-scale social media war from his fiercely loyal fanbase. And honestly, he's probably right about that reaction, which makes his willingness to say it even more interesting.
Nate Diaz, he is the most puzzling. He's not. I don't even think he's that good. I'll go get his record if you want me to. But he has convinced people he is good at fighting somehow, some way.
He's pretty good.
I'm gonna go get his damn record, Daniel. It's not.
But he won the Ultimate Fighter. He won the Ultimate Fighter. I'm saying he was good for the time that he was fighting.
No, he wasn't. He was average.
He was. Yeah. Okay. I'm just.
Okay.
Trying
I'm gonna go get the record. I'm gonna go get the record. They're gonna yell at me. I know this. Okay. Let's see. Well, his record is 21-13.
Oh my God. Really?
Yes, that's not that great.
Okay, I take it back. I'm taking it back.
And he was going into the UFC, he was, I think it was 5-1. So within the UFC, he was 16-12.
That's not good.
That's not very good.
That's not good. There's really no way to twist that into good.
Yeah. So but you know, his personality, that's another one's like, how did his personality catch on? He says funny things sometimes. He's a little bit different. I don't know. Yeah. And listen, if you post this clip, please don't post this clip.
Now let's talk about who should actually be headlining this White House card, because the opinions from industry insiders are all over the place. Daniel Cormier weighed in on the Jon Jones heavyweight discussion with some much-needed realism. While he acknowledged that Jones moving up in weight is intriguing, Cormier firmly believes that Jones's best work, and crucially the matchup fans really want to see, still lies at light heavyweight. He specifically mentioned a potential clash with Alex Pereira at 205 pounds as the fight that makes the most sense for such a historic event. Cormier pointed out that while Jones has bulked up significantly over the years, cutting back down to make 205 is still well within his capabilities, keeping that dream matchup very much alive. Meanwhile, Jon Anik laid out his comprehensive vision for the card, mixing practicality with pure fan service. His main event featured the heavyweight championship, most likely Tom Aspinall defending against Cyril Gane, while acknowledging that the Jon Jones versus Alex Pereira buzz remains uncertain. For the co-main, he penciled in a bantamweight title fight between Petr Yan and Merab Dvalishvili, expressing hope that fans could witness 4 or even 5 undisputed titles contested on the White House lawn. Can you imagine the historic significance of that kind of card? Here's where it gets absolutely insane. Brendan Schaub unveiled what he enthusiastically calls his dream card, a lineup so stacked it would make any MMA fan lose their mind completely. He loaded it with electrifying names like Ilya Topuria, Islam Makhachev, Sean Strickland, Alex Pereira, and Jon Jones, plus the highly anticipated McGregor versus Diaz trilogy fight. Schaub called it the kind of lineup he'd pay top dollar to watch without hesitation. But he didn't stop at the main card, emphasizing that even the prelims featuring rising stars like Gable Steveson and Bo Nickel would be must-see television, with Michael Chandler also locked in to round out what he described as a card so epic it could redefine fan expectations forever. In contrast, Henry Cejudo focused on what he believes is the absolute biggest potential matchup for the White House card. Out of several high-stakes options, including Alex Pereira versus Jon Jones, Jones versus Tom Aspinall, Jones versus Francis Ngannou, and McGregor versus Chandler, Cejudo put his money on Jones versus Aspinall. For him, this isn't just about current rankings or recent form. It's about symbolism, a clash perfectly suited for America's 250th birthday, pitting the greatest of all time against the present. In his view, that fight has the power to define the entire historic event. So here's where we stand after hearing from all the biggest names in the sport. And honestly, the picture is both clearer and more confusing than ever. The demand for McGregor versus Diaz 3 is undeniable, with fans constantly bringing it up on social media and industry insiders quietly pushing for it behind the scenes. But the practical challenges are massive, from timing issues to questions about competitive relevance to concerns about whether it fits the historic nature of a White House card. Meanwhile, you have potential superfights like Jones versus Pereira that could legitimately be called once-in-a-lifetime matchups, but carry their own risks and complications. The heavyweight division is heating up with Aspinall, Gane, and others creating compelling storylines that don't require aging legends. And through it all, you have the business reality that star power often trumps everything else when it comes to making these massive events successful. The truth is, we're probably 18 months away from knowing what actually happens, and in MMA, that might as well be a lifetime. So here's my question for you, and I really want to know what you think. Do you believe Nate Diaz will actually step back into the octagon to finally complete the trilogy with Conor? Or is McGregor going to end up facing a completely different opponent for his return? Are we overthinking this whole White House card situation? Or is it really going to be the historic event everyone's predicting? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Hit that like button if this breakdown helped you understand what's really happening behind the scenes. And make sure you subscribe and ring the notification bell because this story is just getting started, and things are about to get even crazier. The reality is, while everyone's debating dream matchups and fantasy cards, there's a much bigger story unfolding that nobody's talking about. The White House card represents something that goes way beyond just another UFC event. It's potentially the moment when mixed martial arts officially becomes America's sport. Think about what that means for a second. We've watched MMA grow from underground spectacle to mainstream entertainment, but hosting fights on the White House lawn would be the ultimate legitimization. This isn't just about putting on a show. It's about the sport earning a place in American history alongside baseball, football, and basketball. But here's what's really keeping Dana White up at night, and this is where the business gets absolutely ruthless. Every single fighter mentioned for this card knows their leverage just skyrocketed through the roof. When you're dealing with a once-in-a-lifetime venue and historic significance, normal negotiation tactics go out the window completely. McGregor's asking price was already astronomical, but now, we're talking about numbers that would make Hollywood A-listers jealous. Jon Jones isn't going to step foot in that octagon for anything less than the biggest payday in combat sports history. Even fighters like Nate Diaz, who's never been primarily motivated by money, understand that this is their chance to secure generational wealth. The UFC has always prided itself on controlling costs and maintaining their business model, but this card threatens to completely shatter their entire pay structure. And here's the part that's absolutely mind-blowing when you really think about it. We're not just talking about American fighters getting this historic opportunity. Imagine being Islam Makhachev or Alex Pereira, fighters who represent other nations, getting the chance to potentially become champion on American soil in the most patriotic setting possible. The storylines write themselves, but they also create massive political and cultural implications that extend far beyond sports. What happens if a foreign fighter dominates an American legend on the White House lawn? How does that play with audiences who are expecting this to be a celebration of American combat sports? The optics become incredibly complex when you start mixing athletic competition with national symbolism and political messaging. Here's something else that's flying completely under the radar in all these discussions. The security requirements for hosting a combat sports event at the White House would be unlike anything we've ever seen in sports history. We're talking about Secret Service protocols, background checks for every single person involved, restricted airspace, and security measures that would make a presidential inauguration look casual. The logistical nightmare alone could derail the entire concept before it even gets off the ground. And that's before you consider whether contingency plans, medical emergency protocols, and the fact that you're essentially turning the most secure building in America into a temporary sports venue. The insurance costs alone would be astronomical, and that's assuming insurance companies would even touch something this unprecedented.